Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. If you enjoy this video, please can you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe down below because it really does help out the channel. Both are free to do and I would be greatly appreciated if you could do so. But without further ado, let's get into today's video. So, if you couldn't tell by today's title, I am going to be reading my first ever horror novel. So, I have been watching Ashlyn and Ian on YouTube. I started watching Ashlyn because she reads the same sort of books as I do, Abby Jimenez, Emily Henry, Alison Espach. And I then saw a video that she'd done with her husband Ian, and I loved his personality and his videos as well, so I started watching him. However, he reads a complete different genre to what I do, and that is horror. And the way he talks about Stephen King, in particular his books, has made me want to pick up a Stephen King book. However, a little fun fact about me that you may or may not know is I have never read or watched a horror movie. I have seen It, which I think is the only horror movie I have actually watched, and that didn't scare me. So I don't know if it is actually classed as a horror movie or not, but I am so excited to read a horror book, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I don't get too scared by it because I don't want to be having nightmares. But this weekend I went into Waterstones and I picked up my first ever horror novel, which is by Stephen King. Now, I went into Waterstones wanting to pick up Pet Sematary just because that was a book that I sort of thought that I would enjoy, and I'd seen Ian and Ashlyn both talk about it. However, my Waterstones didn't have it, so instead I picked up Misery. And I don't actually know what this book is about. I have already started it. I'm on chapter 10, which is page 26. And I'm going to be completely honest, I am really confused. I always get like this when I start a book. The first few pages I tend to be quite confused until I know a little bit more about the characters and a little bit more about the storyline. So as of right now, I haven't got anything to tell you, and as of right now, to me it doesn't seem like I'm reading a horror novel. So I've got a feeling when I probably get halfway through, that's when the horror stuff is starting to kick in. So I'm going to continue reading a little bit more, and when I get some sort of update I will let you know. But yeah, thank you Ian, because you have got me obsessed with Stephen King, although I haven't actually read one of his books. And fingers crossed I enjoy this, because I saw Ian's display of Stephen King books and it looks so cool. I have the same ones that he has on display, although he's got quite a few Stephen King books, but he has like the full collection of this one, I believe, and it looks so cool because they are a complete colour gradient. If I can find a picture, I'll put it on screen. And if I enjoy this, I am definitely going to get all the Stephen King books and have them all on display, because oh my god, that'd be so cool. But I'm going to stop, chatting, and I'm going to continue reading, and I'll give you an update when I'm a few more pages into the book. So it is the next day and I am a little bit further into the book Misery. I haven't read much. I'm on page 58 and I finally understand the concept of this book. Now, I did do a little bit of research because I wanted to know a bit more about this book, and it turns out that Misery is one of Stephen King's darkest books. Apparently it is not only scary but also very depressing, and I am even more curious about reading this book than I was before. So the concept of this book is we have a writer and he has been in a car accident and a woman found him, and this woman turns out to be his #1 fan. And at first she didn't believe that you know, the person that she had found was the legendary writer. But when she saw the ID and the pictures, she was like, this is 100% him. So she takes him back to, I believe, a cabin, a house. From the front of the book, it looks like a cabin, so that's what I'm going with. And he wakes up in one of her bedrooms, and he kind of realizes that he's in a bit of pain, and she tells him what happens and tells him that he's been in some sort of car accident, and he thinks like, okay, but he then is really confused because why is he not at the hospital, why is he at her house? And it turns out that she reads one of his last books, which is a book part of the sequel Misery, and the woman character in this dies, and she is now saying like, you know, she can't die, you can't do that to her, you killed her. And I believe she wants to get revenge because he killed off this character that she, you know, loved and really enjoyed. So she's currently caring for him, but there was a point where she didn't feed him or didn't, you know, give him anything to drink for a certain amount of hours, and then she's thrown bowls of soup, she's made him burn one of his books that he's written, and honestly the whole situation is kind of bizarre. But I'm going to continue reading because I want to give you a little bit more information. But yeah, I don't know what the horror is going to be yet. I can sort of picture what I think is going to happen. From that, I think that she's just going to torment him, and you know, there's going to be some gruesome acts, but I will let you know when I get there. So I'm going to continue reading. Hi everyone, so it's been a few days since I last updated you, and I do apologise, but both my babies have been really ill, so I haven't had a chance to film. And if you couldn't tell, I'm still in my pyjamas, my hair needs to be washing. It's been a bit of a rough few days, but I just wanted to quickly take this opportunity while both the babies are asleep to quickly update you on the book Misery. I finally get this book. It's took me quite a bit to actually understand what's going on. I understand how Stephen King writes. I understand the way the characters think. So the main character Paul, he speaks a lot in his brain, which is also written in the book, and you have to sort of decipher what's, you know, he's really saying and what's in his brain, which can be easy because it is normally in a different font. But it's still, at first I kind of didn't understand what was in a different font, but now I understand it's his inner voice speaking. And then I also understand the storyline. So I have picked out a few quotes that I wanted to read to you. So the first quote, one second, let me find it. So the first quote is from page 171, and it's the start of chapter 10. Annie Wilkes had her own interior set of rules. In her way, she was strangely prim. She had made him drink water from the floor bucket and had withheld his medication until he was in agony, had made him burn the only copy of his new novel, had handcuffed him and stuck a rag reeking of furniture polish in his mouth, but she would not take the money from his wallet. She brought it to him, the old scuffed Lord Buxton he had since college, and put it in his hands. So you can see the way Annie is treating Paul. And for a little context, Annie found Paul on the side of the road. He'd been in a car accident, and she took him in to care for him, but she then found out that he was actually a famous writer, and she's now sort of manipulating him into writing a new novel because he wrote the last book called Misery. It is a series. He wrote the last one, and Annie's not happy with what happens. Basically, the main character in that book dies at the end of it, and Annie's like, no, you need to bring her back, I'm not happy with that. So she's manipulating him into writing another book only for her, and she is not treating him very nicely. So you can sort of see their relationship from that quote. Then I also picked out another quote to sort of show Stephen King's writing. So it says, whenever the Camaro stole into his mind, he immediately called the brain police. He had that thought led away in handcuffs and leg irons. Trouble was, the nasty thing had a way of escaping and coming back in time after time in one form or another. So you can sort of see how Stephen King is describing certain things in a sort of real way. So for example, he keeps thinking that his car is going to be found because, you know, it's dumped on the side of the road. Police are going to find it, see that serious accident, and then go looking for him. But like, who would say that, you know, he's getting that thought took away by the brain police? Like, Stephen King is such an incredible writer for thinking of quotes like that. So I am on page 211 and I am actually really enjoying this book. I think there's so many things that I could say about it. Just the way Paul's being treated, the way Paul thinks, the Paul's writing, the way Annie is because she has a mental illness. You know, I could explain so many things, but I don't want to give any spoilers away because I do really think that this is a good book. And obviously I haven't finished it yet. I still haven't found anything that I would, you know, class as horror. I think I've got like 150 pages left, so I'm over the halfway mark now. But yeah, I'm gonna continue reading. I'll probably update you again tomorrow just so I can get a good chunk of it done. But yeah, I'm enjoying this, and I can see why people rave about Stephen King's writing because he is just an extraordinary writer. And even if you don't like horror, I feel like if you've just read the first half of this book, because so far, like I've said, I haven't found any horror, so if you want to say read a bit of Stephen King's writing, then I highly recommend reading the first half of this. Obviously I will let you know when I find the horror and let you know how scary or what it is. But I know Stephen King writes a few genres. His main speciality is horror, but he does do thrillers and stuff like that. So I'm starting to wonder, is this actually horror or is this more of a thriller with a twist? Okay guys, guess what? I finished the book now. Before I tell you about the book, please ignore my wet hair. I've literally just got out the shower. But yes, I finished it. Now, like about halfway through the book, I literally couldn't put it down. Obviously I did because I have children, but you get what I mean. I was literally such a page turner. Now, the first section of the book I struggled to get into, but it's not Stephen King's fault and it's not the Misery Book fault. I find that with every single book that I start, it takes me a few chapters to get into it, which I don't know if that's normal for a book, but it's just what happens with me. But once I was halfway through the book and I understood what was happening, I understood the characters and Stephen King's writing, I was really enjoying it. And then the last section of it, so from when he finished the novel, I could not put it down. In fact, I think I spent the last hour finishing this book, and hands down, this was such a good book. If you are looking to get into horror, I would highly recommend this one because it's not scary. It definitely has some dark, twisted things that happen in it, which I'll tell you in a minute. But I think that if you're looking to get into horror, you could easily get through this one and slowly build yourself up. Now, intentionally, I didn't pick this one for that reason. I actually went to get Pet Sematary, but they didn't have it, so I picked this one up. But it turned out to actually work out in the end. So I'm now going to talk about some of the horror acts that happen in this book. So if you are a little bit squeamish, then please, you know, click off this video. But yeah, let's talk a little bit further about this book. So the first kind of horror thing to happen in the book is Annie Wilkes cuts off Paul's leg. Yes, I know. Basically, Annie's kind of discovered that Paul has been getting out of the bedroom, so she leaves him for a few days sometimes, and he discovered that he can use a bobby pin to unlock the bedroom door and he can get out. And Annie has discovered that, you know, he can get out, so she cuts off his leg. And when I was reading it, it did make me feel a little bit squeamish because I am really not good with blood. If I see blood, I faint, and I feel like that's why I've never really watched horror films. However, if I keep saying in my head the blood is fake, then I'm normally okay. But if I go to like a doctor's surgery, for example, if I get my bloods took, I'm so bad I can't look because if I see the blood, I automatically get queasy. So yeah, that kind of chapter was definitely a little bit challenging to read because of that, but it wasn't as bad. Like when you think of horror, you kind of think of it to be a little bit worse than what it was. But yeah, that was actually quite easy for me to read. And then a few chapters later, it literally just says Annie cut my thumb off, or my finger off, and I'm like, have I missed something? Did I miss where she cut it off? But I was like, let me continue reading. And then another chapter later, it tells us why Annie done it, and Annie gets an electric knife and cuts his finger and thumb off. And then a few chapters later, Annie kills a police officer, and she is on one of those ride-on lawnmowers and runs him over. So, like, you think all of these things is definitely horror related, and don't get me wrong, they definitely are, but when I was reading it I wasn't scared or anything like that, which is kind of what I wanted with a horror novel. And then the last kind of horror gruesome thing to happen is Paul finishes his book and he decides that he's going to burn the novel because he's like, you know, Annie doesn't need to read it because of all the things that she's done to him. So he burns it, and then Annie picks up the paper and sets her cardigan on fire, and then he gets a typewriter and smashes her on the head, and there's this whole like massive fight that is a few pages long. You know, there's several things that happen. There was a champagne bottle that got smashed and he had a bit of glass in his arm, so yeah, there's a whole massive scene about that happens as well. But honestly, this book was really, really good, and like I said, the last half of it, I couldn't put it down. I literally had to finish it. Now, I will say the end of this book was definitely not what I expected. I really thought that Annie was going to kill Paul, but she doesn't. I know, spoiler, I'm sorry, but yeah, she doesn't actually kill him, and Paul goes on to live his life. Like, I would say a normal life, but obviously he has a prosthetic leg and he is struggling because he still can't fathom that Annie's dead, and he thinks that Annie's just going to pop up and kill him, but it turns out that she was actually dead. The police said that she was dead, and he keeps like seeing Annie pop up in front of him, and then he has to close his eyes and open them again and realizes that he's just hallucinating. So yeah, this book was really, really good, and I definitely want to read another one of Stephen King's books, but I want to kind of read one that's more like scary than this. So please let me know if you've read any of Stephen King's books and which one I should read next, because this was a really, really good book. And in terms of rating, what am I going to rate it? I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. Now, my reason for giving it that rating is, in this book he's also writing the novel Misery, and I was finding myself like really struggling to read the Misery pages. So I was struggling to understand Misery's character. Some of the words that were being used in the Misery like novel that was being written by Paul in this, I was really confused by, and it did take me quite a bit to get into it as well. So I am going to give it 4 stars, but it was really, really good. I think I'm giving it 4 stars as more of a harsh rating, but there was just nothing that really jumped out to me that would make me give it a higher rating. And I think because of how many pages of the novel that Paul was writing that was in it that I was confused by, I have to kind of downgrade it a little bit. So if you can help maybe make me understand the novel that Paul was writing a little bit better, then maybe I might jump the rating a little bit higher. But for now, I'm going to give it 4 stars and highly, highly recommend this one if you haven't already.